Fairfax Planning Commission meeting of July 16, 2015 to order. May we have a roll call?
Commissioner Ackerman. Commissioner Fragoso. Present. Commissioner Kierline.
Here.
And Commissioner Newton. Here. Chair Green, Vice Chair Hamilton, and Commissioner Gonzalez-Parba are absent.
And Madam Chair, for the record, if I could make note that you are acting as chair tonight. You are the most senior member of the Planning Commission. We have both the chair and the vice chair absent, so protocol would call that you're sitting in the seat. You're also the most recent vice chair, so thank you very much for sitting in.
My pleasure. Okay, so next is approval of the agenda. Is this where we would?
Not yet.
No, not yet. Okay, well, on consent items, but anyone want to make a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay,
And you can skip the protocol
I'll
if you like.
skip the protocol. Is anyone here who wants to speak on an item that's not listed on the agenda? Okay, well, then we'll move right on to consent items. First of all, do any of the commissioners have any technical questions of staff?
Actually, I do on item 2. I have I think a question just for staff on item 2. I don't need to pull the item. I just was wondering, in looking at the that staff report and the plans, just for staff to clarify for me, is the structure, the storage structure that's an L shape constructed around the garage, that's not being taken down, is it?
No.
Okay, it's the smaller one straight ahead on the north side of
Right.
the fence, the 25 square footer that's coming down. There's also a requirement that it not be used as is it not used as a living space? What is the language here?
Yeah, detached accessory structures are only allowed to be used for certain things. Garages, storage. If you want to use them as living space, they need to come back to the Planning Commission and get a use permit.
Okay, because I just wanted to say this is the type of property that's so constrained by the site that it might be appropriate to look at something like this for a second unit ordinance down the road if the applicants would be interested in something like that. I'm glad it's not being taken down, and otherwise I like the improvement. So that's all the questions I had for staff. Thank you.
Anyone else? For the consent items?
I have a question for the chair.
Yes.
I noticed some very minor grammatical typos in the resolutions. Are those things that we care about? They don't seem to affect the meaning, but they're just little tiny typos.
Madam Chair, first of all, if you could pull your mic a little bit closer. I think I heard you, Mimi, ask if there's minor corrections to the reso. Is that something we bring up now? We would be glad to take those offline if they're clerical.
Okay, yeah, they're just clerical. Thanks.
Okay, does anyone in the public have any technical questions?
Or would like to pull.
Or would like to pull an item for discussion?
And you might just read the addresses in case they haven't read the agenda.
Sure, the items on the items on the consent agenda are 113 Hillside Drive, 22 Pacheco Avenue, 232 Hillside Drive, 138 Ridgeway Avenue, and 69 Spruce Road has been continued to August 20th.
I move approval. Sorry, I move approval of all of the consent items.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, so we have approved, yes, Jim?
Yes.
Right, yeah, yeah. So there is a 10-day appeal period where, if anyone would like to do that, but otherwise, your projects are approved and you may move forward with the
Right.
next.
And if I could just reiterate, because sometimes it's not easily understood, if you were here for any of the items on consent that they just read off, they've just been approved. They're subject to appeal over a 10-day period, $500 fee. But if you're here for those items, they're approved. Congratulations. Thank you. Good work. Which gets us to
Okay, so the next item is the item number 6, 2001 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. So, and I know this was a
Right.
item from last meeting.
Right, it was
so-
continued from the June meeting, and the Planning Commission directed the applicants to explore alternative parking lot designs. It was discovered that the parking lot was not wide enough to allow cars to turn around when all the spots were parked in, so people were going to have to back out on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. Yeah. And the commission indicated that the project must be redesigned to provide adequate maneuvering room so that vehicles entering a full parking lot would be able to turn around and exit onto Sir Francis Drake Boulevard head first. So the applicants have redesigned the site, increasing the parking lot aisle width to 26 feet by decreasing the planting strip between the parking lot and the town public right-of-way by 2 feet. Otherwise, the project remains the same. I think they did relocate this garbage a little bit, right? Yes, okay. The town traffic engineer has verified that the new design will allow vehicles to turn around in 4 moves inside the parking lot so that they will not have to back out onto Sir Francis Drake. Please note that narrowing of the planting strip along the east side of the parking lot will make it difficult to maintain a vibrant planting area in this location, and that in the future, should the town extend Bank Street through to Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, there will be less than the required 4 feet for a sidewalk. Likewise, it was noted at the previous Planning Commission meeting, it appears that there's room to make up that 2 feet on the outdoor eating area western side of the site. Having said that, the applicants have indicated they do not want to shift the parking lot to the west because they want the sidewalk that runs through the site to pass by the front entry door where it is currently located. Staff believes that the front entry door could have been relocated and/or the sidewalk could be reconfigured to retain the 4-foot wide planting strip next to town-owned Bank Street easement and also meet the applicant's goals. So the parking as revised still requires a variance to decrease the parking from the required 10 spaces to 9 spaces, but staff does feel we can make the recommended findings for approval of that parking variance. And therefore, we're recommending that you approve application 1518 by adopting resolution 1520, granting a use permit, design review, and a sign permit for the proposed modifications to 2001 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. And that would conclude our report.
I just point out one thing. That eastern 4 feet that was previously there between the parking area and the town easement, I believe in the last iteration it did not show it necessarily as landscaped area, which we had discussed on the one hand. I had always looked at that 4-foot strip as also potentially being sidewalk, so that those coming into the parking lot, if they happen to park on the east side, rather than crossing the parking lot drive aisle, they could actually get onto that sidewalk and connect with the more formal sidewalk that goes along Broadway. So I just want to point out, we're still recommending approval. We're just pointing out for the record that we think it would have been possible to move in the western direction. We don't have major heartburn about going from 4 to 2. We think it would have been possible to go in the other direction and leave the 4. But again, we didn't change our recommendation because we didn't have, major major concerns on that. They did increase the drive aisle going in the eastern direction from 24 feet to 26. They, through their traffic consultant, showed us the turning moves for the existing, what had been previously submitted with 24, and it showed that there would have been 6 moves for a car, SUV, or a large SUV. And what they've confirmed through their traffic consultant, W-Trans, now with the 26-foot aisle, is that a car, a SUV, or a large SUV could make the turnaround in 4 moves, and they relocated that trash a little bit to be able to make that 4-point or 4-move turn. And they're not taking any of the hatched area now from the, the ADA space, Americans with Disability space. So that was good. Again, just to sort of dovetail what Linda in her report has articulated, we liked the project. We liked the design. We liked the idea of the sidewalk coming off Sir Francis Drake, sweeping to the east and down and connecting with Broadway, going across the public Bank Street easement and connecting to the crosswalk that currently goes across Broadway. Someone brought up which trees were going out. And Mimi, we went back. There are 2 small redwoods that had actually been unfortunately topped at one point. They're very minor. I think if they reach the threshold of trunk size, they'll still have to go to the tree committee, which, as you know, we're trying to figure that out. We're trying to amend that so that you all can make the final determination on tree cuts here without a duplication of effort with the tree committee. So we're satisfied. It's just, we wanted to point out for the record that we thought there was room going west, and that's kind of where we sort of saw you pushing it, but so be it. And with that, thank you.
And I forgot to tell you that the applicants, at the request of one of the commissioners, also prepared a plan that shows in a darker color the areas of the public right-of-way that they're using for landscaping and their pathway. And also they submitted by email an explanation of why they felt they were unable to to shift the parking lot over to the west.
Which had to do with the orientation of the door where it presently sits and the approach of the sidewalk, which they desire the way it's going. So it's up to you.
Okay, so does anyone have questions of staff?
Go ahead. Through the chair, I don't know that I have a question of staff. I just would like to comment that I'm unhappy with this 2-foot solution that was provided. It seemed to me there's plenty of space, plenty of ways that it could be maneuvered to take a foot out of one side and leave at least a 3-foot walkway. I find it unacceptable for cars parking up along that side 2 feet. My associate here is a nice tall guy. He could barely get into that 2-feet section, I think. So I'm very unhappy with it. I know staff has done what they could.
And Norma, for the record, 3 feet doesn't cut it with a legal sidewalk under ADA. It's actually, we call it 4 feet. I think it's technically 44 inches or something, but 4 feet is the normal thing with the actual curb attached to the sidewalk. So 3 feet wouldn't have cut it. 4 feet would have given us the wherewithal.
I just feel that we're doing all the accommodating here with all the encroachments and the variances, and they couldn't be bothered to really take a serious look at that.
And at this point, we're sort of entertaining any questions, and once they give their presentation, you may reflect differently, so I'd hear them out.
I think
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry, Mimi.
So I'm curious about the big picture in terms of the town right-of-way, because, frankly, on the other side, we've got the parking lot. We don't leave a full 4 feet on the other side either with our parking.
There's a greenscape there with trees that sort of inhibit our ability to move east. East from the 24-foot,
One would assume that if, in fact, the town develops the right-of-way as a road, that those trees will have to come down.
It's not a done deal because the right-of-way right now is 24 feet. For major arterial connection like that, a minimum road width is, or aisle width is 12 feet. So it's just enough to, I think it's actually 24.6, just enough to accommodate cars in both ways. I would remind you that we have a complete streets policy in the town, which where possible, there are exceptions to this, we want streets to not only accommodate cars, but bicyclists and pedestrians also. So this is going to be a challenge when Bank Street goes through, presumably it will go through someday, to accommodate pedestrians. I would remind you that the very nice sidewalk coming through the site is coming through private property, and that's a different beast than the public right-of-way. And having said that, this 4 feet is on their property, and it's, like it or not, California law is that the sidewalk, curb, and gutter is the responsibility of the adjacent property owner.
So my question goes to the big picture in terms of the town's plan for this area, and I think the general plan touches on it, and I didn't have time to look at what it said. So my question for you is, what does the general plan say about this whole intersection? Would it keep the parking area here when it moves the street through the middle, or is that the extension of the parkade through that intersection?
Parking on this property or the East Star parking?
What I'm trying to understand is, at some point in the future, the town may develop this right-of-way and may push Bank Street through to Sir Francis Drake. Mm-hmm. In the eventuality that that happens, what happens to the east side of this right-of-way in terms of the parking that's currently there, the intersection that's currently there, and the parkade to the east of the intersection?
Totally up in the air. There's no final disposition whatsoever, no preliminary plans. We have a parkade plan in place, which it's gotten a little stale. It was adopted 5 years ago, so we're going to have a public meeting on that to revisit the design that was adopted by council in March of 2010. It's a little stale, but we don't have any interventions laid out for the Klaus Street, Sir Francis Drake intersection, nor that little satellite parking area, nor the sidewalk on the east side of the Bank Street easement should it be blown through.
And does the town own this parking that says Town of Fairfax parking? We own
Yes,
the property
yes.
to the east
Yes,
of the easement?
all the way.
So if in fact we were to build this out, we always also have the option of moving the road a few feet over, don't we? If we feel so strongly about a sidewalk on
Yes.
the Bank Street, we
Yes.
can move it. That's all I need to know, thanks.
Yes, but there are some more significant trees on that east side.
Yeah, I'm just to clarify, are we limited to technical questions? Because I have a few things that are kind
Just
of on.
No, we're open.
questions
I'll
of
just-
staff.
okay.
Yeah, questions of staff.
Well, I have a few small edits that let's get to later, but since we're in this discussion that's substantive, my thought as I was reading through this and thinking about it was to add a condition, which I've actually drafted wording for to suggest. If we could add a condition that I would think the applicants would be okay with, because this appears to be the intent now, but the purpose of adding the condition would be to make sure this doesn't change in the future, that this sidewalk, which is 4 feet wide, that goes through the property and continues, this one that you were referring to, which I agree is nice, and if I were coming from down at M&G Burger area and coming into town, let's say going from M&G Burgers to Fairfax Scoop, that would be exactly the way I would go. It's the shortest distance. It kind of cuts across there. But just add a condition that through sidewalk needs to be open all the time, open to the general public. I understand that's probably your intent now, but to
like a
add
public
that
easement. Like a public easement.
that would be treated as a public easement, even
So-
though it's on the property.
Interesting idea, and I would suggest you discuss it when they give their
Yeah. So
update.
I guess the first thing is a technical question. Could something like that be done? And then for fellow commissioners, would that address, to me, it feels like that addresses the issue, because I would picture right now, if there were a 4-foot sidewalk over here on the east side, and there were also everything else just the way it is now, and I were going, let's say, from M&G's to Fairfax Scoop, I would take this route rather than the new 4-foot one. So I'm just not sure how much extra it really gives the town to have that 4 feet there if we can guarantee that the other one is going to be in place.
Well, the only caveat, it's a minor one, is that if you're parking in that parking lot, you do have you're parking on the east side.
Okay, yeah, and I had a question about that because I heard you say that. Isn't it, there's an accessible loading space. There's the last parking place, the southeast spot.
And that connects with the parking lot.
And that
the
actually,
sidewalk.
isn't there a place in the gate? I've seen that on some drawings and not on others. I guess this is a question for the applicant. Isn't there a way, leaving that accessible loading space to get on? I've seen, yeah, right, there's a little bend in the dotted line here that
Yes.
goes over to the accessible space and looks to me like a gate in the, yeah.
It's a flush.
So that's,
It's flush.
yeah, and so that means that anyone, really, whether they're using that accessible space or whether they're using any of the other spaces, would have the option of walking through there
From
and connecting
from behind the cars, yes.
without having to go.
That's true. That's a good
Yeah,
point. That's
yeah.
a good point.
So there is an option, which, again, that's a more direct route than to go around the lot and down the,
That's a good point.
so. Yeah, I have a few smaller things, but I think we should continue on the substantive discussions before we get into them. And if we are interested in this, I have draft wording here. Thank you.
I've done a lot of site plans for, my architectural firm used to do fast food restaurants with drive-throughs, and I've done lots and lots of site plans. And many times, instead of putting in a wheel stop for the car, to limit the car for how far it is, we can extend the curb of the planter or the sidewalk to an extra 2 feet to eliminate the wheel stop. So that's what I'm thinking we can do for that little strip on the we could shorten the car stall to 17 feet. So then the 2 foot, usually there's like a 2 foot overhang for the car so that you can get your 4 feet that way. And normally, I think Bruce's comment is people do normally circulate through the parking lot. That's considered standard practice.
The only thinking out loud with you, the only response on that is that if you're doing that, then in essence, the car is actually overhanging 2 of those 4 feet, potentially. So you're not actually getting 4 feet clear, you're just changing how the car is parked, whether part of it's over the hard or softscape or whether it's all in the space itself. And by the way, we don't require wheel stops. We don't usually, to my knowledge in this town, use wheel stops. They can actually be a liability.
I agree with your point, but it's just a way to get a little extra buffer was what my thought. And it wasn't clear to me because I guess I didn't look at the legend that, and I guess we don't really have a formal landscape plan in the packet, so I wasn't sure what was planned for the right-of-way. If it was going to be, so it looks like there's going to be some type of landscape.
And you want to hear from the applicant on that. Yeah.
Okay.
One more question on your point through the chair. So if there's no wheel stop, then effectively the edge of the 2 foot curb is the wheel stop and the front of the car will be directly over the less than adequate 2 feet that we're left with there.
It could be, depending on what you put in the 2 feet.
I'm sorry, I forgot. I had another question for staff. And I noticed this in the minutes, so I wanted to clarify what I had been talking about at our meeting last month about the no left turn. It said in the minutes that we were talking about egress. And I had actually not even considered egress, but obviously egress, no left turn, out of that would be wise. I had been thinking about people traveling west on Sir Francis Drake and there being no left turn ingress.
And that's correct.
Okay.
David Parisi says with the bikes there and everything, he doesn't want people turning left from
Okay.
Sir Francis Drake into that lot.
Okay, great.
And
Just wanted to
one minor little note. We sent you supplemental that we forgot, which was showing the turn motions, the number of turns, and I had actually drawn in, I think it was on the car sheet, an arrow sort of as a car's coming out, and that line of sight past a monument sign. We were just chatting about it at the table, and so that's my addition to that one sheet. It was just an arrow showing the line of sight from the driver's side coming out, verifying that they can see past a monument sign for oncoming traffic going east on Sir Francis Drake.
Through the chair, regarding the no left turn, Linda, I'm sure, will recall that when the Good Earth was in the now Bike Museum, and probably the Bike Museum as well, due to the proximity to the street light, to the street corner, is not allowed a left turn either on that side of the street.
Jim, I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. You drew a line on
Okay.
this map?
Yeah. Well, I got it in the email. Yeah. Yeah, you did. Yeah.
No, I don't see it.
Bruce has got it.
Oh, maybe it's not on this one.
This is it right here. This is a car pulled up to the sidewalk. Here's the monument sign. The question was whether
Yeah.
the monument sign blocks the site. But once you pull up far enough beyond the monument site, then you can see.
Oh, it's this one. Okay. Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah, so any more questions of staff? Okay, would the applicants like to come up and?
Hello. Thank you. This is a much more intimate group tonight, it seems like. My name is Brian Back from the station, and I'm going to be real short and sweet because we talked, I know, a lot last month. The station is a family business on behalf of my wife, Elizabeth, and I. And just to talk really briefly, the vision for this project is that our intention is to upcycle an auto-centric building into a pedestrian and family-friendly gathering spot. A lot of forward-thinking, sustainable design features that we already went through last week. We don't have a slide for it, but we're attempting to really create a sense of place here, and that's, I think, very intentional when we get into all the aspects of the different parts of the design. And as I hope you'll see when Sean speaks, that we definitely have taken a very, very close look at every aspect of this thing and have responded very seriously to all the feedback we've received, not only from the commissioners and the staff, but also from the community at large. I think as demonstrated by all the letters that were received on this project in support of it. And that's about it. I just wanted to say that, and I'll turn it over to Sean. I just want to say also, too, that I've been very happy working with Sean and Maxine. Having done what we've done, their intent is really to incorporate our vision of this new kind of fuel-up spot that I mentioned. And I'll let them talk further about that.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you to Jim, Linda, and the commissioners who are here today and the ones that were not able to make it. As a reintroduction, I'm Sean Kennedy, one of the principals of the architecture firm Studio Skaggs Kennedy. We're the designers and architects of record for the station project. And I think I want to kind of go back to something that has been brought up already, and it's a general item that needs to be said about design and why we've presented the design as proposed to you all, and not the numerous options that we've explored to date. We work with a lot of constraints, program, accessibility, infrastructural, cost implications that have to be considered, analyzed, and synthesized into a final plan, image, and proposal. And in that process, we go through many floor plan and site plan design options, and we try to consider everything before that. We're listening to our client, and we really listen to the community, and including all of the commissioners from our last meeting, and have tried to generate a thoughtful response to all of these constraints and considerations. I think we find that what we're showing tonight is it's a synthesis of these constraints. And so it's not only an analysis of parking, turning radii, which is a very important issue, as important as anything else. But it's, we really, to go back to what Brian said, we really want this project to be a part of the community. And so I wanted to go briefly through the design updates based on some of the responses we received from you last time, and in the interim with planning, and also go back over some of the strong things that we see as really important to the project in terms of its relationship to what goes on downtown or in the town, and continuing that into the project site. So as noted in the staff report, there's hours of operation and delivery requirements. We heard that. The big thing is we looked at the parking lot, and we knew 26 feet would give us a lot more maneuvering room. But the big thing was to move the trash enclosure. And I think that was a suggestion in the last meeting from you, Norma, in terms of getting backup space for the car. And just so we all know, the turning radii is based on a 19-foot car, which is larger than a Chevy Suburban, just to put things in context. Average car being a Chevy Malibu or a VW Passat or a Nissan and a Honda Accord, which are 15'9", so a full 3 feet shorter than a Chevy Suburban. And I think we also did look at the option, as shown on the slide, of reduction to 8 parking spaces, but it didn't greatly improve our turning radii, and we lost a parking space. And what we heard at the last commission from everyone was come back, look at options, come back with a good option, but in essence, don't come back with 8 spaces, because that might be a problem. And so we kept 9 spaces. And as you can see by the diagram, this is a 19-foot car pulling in. It goes towards the right where the hatched ADA zone is, backs up, pulls forward, backs up, pulls out. That's a 19-foot car. A smart car would probably be able to turn around without backing up. Other cars probably much more normal in a 26-foot wide drive aisle. And then I think what we do need to elaborate, we've talked about it already, is the 2-foot planting area, the planting buffer. We looked through a lot of design options and carefully considered those, including relocation of the entry door as called out in the staff report. But when we get to the site plan, I can quickly show you that moving the entry door not only moves it into the center of the project, which then you're entering through seating to get to an entry, or you're reducing seating. it's just not, it's not viable to the operation. But I think the bigger picture for us was we wanted to get that entry at the nexus between a sidewalk that is for the public with a larger area that people could gather, but it's also a landmark for people arriving by car, by bike, and by walking to the site. The thing that, when we looked at the parking lot and moving it to the west, the big thing, even 1 foot constrained the pedestrian path enough that we were worried about accessibility from the ADA parking space. And we can't show ADA, or we just don't think showing ADA through a parking lot, even if it's striped properly and whatnot, is the way to go on the design of the parking lot. So by moving it to the west, it could possibly eliminate that pedestrian connection, and and move that accessible route through the parking lot. Or if we had a 4-foot sidewalk in the future, you would require that person in a wheelchair to get out of their car, go onto a sidewalk, head north to Sir Francis Drake, go across a drive aisle, down a ramp, up a ramp, and come back to the building. And so we're trying to create a connection, but also provide accessibility for people who need to get to the site by a wheelchair. We talked with, we do have a landscape architect on board, and they're a civil engineer, and we talked to them, and they said a 2-foot planter is fairly generous in a downtown environment and can provide a vibrant landscape. He said, 4 feet would be luxurious, but 2 feet is more than enough to plant and provide that screening. What I think we envision isn't something tall. We don't want to block the site, both for any future development or parking, but something that adds a buffer. One thing that we talked about in the last description of the project last time we met was we're trying to soften the edges. We're on Sir Francis Drake, between Broadway and Sir Francis Drake. We want to add as much lushness as we can. And so we really see that as a planting strip. We never really discussed it being more than a planting strip, whether it's 2 or 4 feet. And so the discussion of the sidewalk, I think we're providing the public sidewalk, and I love the idea of a public easement for that sidewalk. We've always intended it to be a public sidewalk, and it's on private property. And if it's 4 feet against the eastern border of the property, it's still on private property. So to us, it's like you take a streetscape in the town where you've got a building, you've got a sidewalk, and then you've got cars. We're trying to do a variation of that. By having a sidewalk go along the eastern property and up to Sir Francis Drake, takes away from that the sort of character of the town that we're trying to create in the site in just a slightly different way. And I think that one thing we do want to end on is that notion that we really want to bring people through the site on a public thoroughfare, and we just see that, like, the sidewalk in the northeast corner. You can see, if you want to skip to the next plan, if you see on the northwest corner or the northeast corner, is kind of going to nowhere, and we're a little worried it's a safety condition. I think the client has said any future development, they're more than willing to have that as part of the conditions to develop at their cost to the town standards. But for now, that for us, it's a safety standard, and we really see the most efficient and the sort of the best and most vibrant pathway being closer to the building and not out at Sir Francis Drake. Thank you.
I've got a question for you.
Sure.
What is that little corner of sidewalk supposed to do?
It was in an earlier request from the town engineer as part of the development. I'm sure the planning could comment on it, but back in April it was requested, so we've placed it on the site plan. But upon looking at it with with W-Trans. As someone who's liable for that, someone to go across the parking lot and get on that sidewalk, to us is a safety hazard. So as part of this, we're fine with doing it in the future, but for now, that to us should come off the plan.
Would you like me to chime in?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a recommendation of our traffic engineer. We get the sidewalks on street frontages when we can on an application like this to prepare for the future. Like you said, the disposition of our town parking lot to the east, blowing through Bank Street, is yet to be designed, but when it is designed, this sidewalk will be there on this applicant's nickel, planning for the future. So.
And what do you think about the safety concerns that the applicant's raising with respect to having it there currently when there really is no place to go there? Does it invite people to cross where we don't want them to cross?
I think that they have a good point that people will come through their sidewalk, and if they don't, it comes to an end, and I think they'll figure out pretty quickly that they missed their chance to connect on a legitimate sidewalk before they cross the curb cut of the parking lot. I think, in fact, they'll probably just meander in that pathway coming down rather than cross the curb cut to get to the orphan sidewalk that's planning for the future.
I think, to clarify, in discussion while we were going through the analysis of the parking lot, W-Trans had a concern with that sidewalk at this stage of the development. And so what we're saying is, as part of any future development, of course, it could be written in that the applicant would be that would be part of their charge to develop that. But for now, it's a safety concern.
Yeah, I'll chime in. You should leave it that way, but you could change. You could add a condition stating that it shall remain a mere safety issue and should not be developed at this time. Should leave it up to the traffic engineer, our traffic engineer.
As opposed to our common sense.
I mean, you can use your common sense, but I just didn't want you to respond to his traffic engineer, right? If you guys feel confident that you think it shouldn't be part of it, then that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me correct something I said. I don't have any firsthand knowledge of wheel stops in town, but Linda reminds me that there are wheel stops in certain situations that are put in. So I would just, following up on your point of this orphan piece of sidewalk on Sir Francis Drake, if you had the 4-foot buffer that you called for a hardscape on, and you had wheel stops so that the car is not protruding into that 4 feet, that orphan sidewalk would then connect with their more elaborate, gracious sidewalk.
Okay, on the same item, through the chair, I believe it is really standard planning practice to have the applicant develop its site to the city code, which includes a sidewalk there. That there's no place it goes to at this point is not really the issue. The issue is to maximize the conformity of the site for the current applicant and in the future. So I would certainly not support removal of that sidewalk and that strip on the northern end.
And may I add, Mimi, with regards to common sense analysis versus the traffic engineer, we're in a liability area here when we're doing this work. So we depend on the learned professionals and their license and their liability to keep the town out of harm's way. So in terms of civil engineering, traffic engineer, we 99.99% of the time we defer to the experts. Now, it doesn't mean they're infallible, but we defer to them.
And final comment through the chair, that is also one of the reasons why it would have been really beneficial to the site and the town to have a wider connecting sidewalk at that point.
So I guess I'll start with a question, which is on the map there to the east of the parking lot, that big area that might later become a street going through. It is currently asphalt right now, correct? because it used to be part of the parking area taken up by Fairfax Gas.
Correct.
What is the intention for that? Is it to leave that asphalt there for now, or is it to take the asphalt out and greenscape it? What is the intention of that?
There's no plans, but if you recall, there's actually a curb with a planter where the sidewalk would go in across the easement connecting over to the crosswalk. Are you with me?
Oh, no. Maybe you could point to it on the map there.
Currently,
Mm-hmm, yeah. Right, yeah. Right. Uh-huh, yeah. So right now, if that little piece of sidewalk up there on the northeast corner of the property stayed as it was on the plan right now, it would not be a sidewalk leading to nowhere, because actually there isn't really any nowhere. Every place is a where. But what the where would actually be would be the corner of an asphalt area right now, which would be a safe place to walk through, not a very green, pleasant place, but a safe place to walk through right now until the town center plan is, in the interim, before we go through. If we do that with that street, it physically is just an asphalt area which one could walk across.
it would be an informal passageway.
Yeah, it'd be an informal passageway, but it wouldn't leave you dumped out into a street.
That's correct.
Right. So I'm not entirely sure what the safety concern is with going ahead and building that sidewalk.
You make a good point.
I just don't understand that.
I think that that's a legitimate point to bring up. I just want to add that if the intention of the pedestrian is to go, and this is the concern that we raised, or worried about with our customers being in harm's way, is that if you're going that way and your intent is to actually go onto the north side of Sir Francis Drake, that corner there's no crosswalks or anything there. So if you're going along, and people have probably informally walked that before, and it's pretty hairy.
And is the applicant's proposal to include landscaping on the easement, or is that the town's responsibility?
Towns.
And so if they move forward with the station development, and it would then be just their neighboring property would be this kind of old asphalt, old gas station
Correct.
parking area until the town decided to do something different.
Correct. And in the interim, there's been some ideas floated around for bicycle parking. The disposition of the temporary testing a bicycle site in front of the roastery was discussed last night at the special council meeting, or the rescheduled council meeting. I think it's coming up again. So there's been some talks about moving some bike racks up there and whatnot in the easement, which would actually connect with that little orphan sidewalk.
If you guys want to look at a few pages in is the survey, and it clearly shows where there's pavement out there right now, where the concrete driveway is, where the property line is.
Actually, a curb cut
Yeah, it's
going
actually
into
a
Sir
curb
Francis
cut.
Drake.
And can I clarify what
says-
what we're showing on our plans as well? Is we're showing that green
Says-
because we would hope that we could work to get that green. It's, as if I owned this, I wouldn't want to look at old asphalt. And I know we talked in our last hearing about phytoremediation, and we've actually, said that would be a perfect place, like Point Reyes Station, other places where there's these somewhat informal areas for bikes to gather, almost like a bike meadow, until whenever in the future something comes about. So I think we showed it green it shows our thinking. We don't want it to stay as asphalt.
But for the record, that's
can I-
not,
But we can't, but it's not part of the project, yeah.
It's the 5th page from the back is the survey.
so, Madam Chair, when you're done with questions of the applicant, I believe we do have some members of the public that might have comments also before you open it up for discussion.
I have another. We talked last time about changing the language in the resolution to, instead of allowing one amplified keyboard, one amplified instrument, and I don't think that change got carried over into the resolution, so that wasn't,
Well, they didn't get us any alternative proposal, so we
I
didn't.
thought the commissioners recommended writing in instrument
The
instead
commissioners
of.
suggested that to them, but they didn't, and asked them to actually look at their hours and the days that they might want to expand it, but we never got anything requesting a change,
But we
so.
can change the reso.
You
I
can
don't know,
still-
if you guys would like the flexibility.
The
to go
flexibility
with
would be nice.
Instrument
Yeah.
instead
We
of
welcome the
keyboard,
suggestion.
just let us know.
Okay. I'm formally letting you know. Well, that sounds like a good idea.
I'm sorry, your mic's off, Bruce.
Any more questions?
I had a question for the applicant and for staff, actually, in regards to the parking, the incentives you propose to offer employees not to park in the lot. And my question for staff is whether we can make that a condition, that parking not be allowed for employees, or a maximum of one space, perhaps. I would appreciate that.
I think in the staff report, there already is a business plan to incorporate incentives. Are you saying to completely eliminate that?
No, I
Okay.
think the incentives are fine, but I don't want to bank on incentives to not have all the spaces used by your 10 employees. So I would rather have it be a condition, and then whatever incentives you offer on top of that would be fantastic for your staff.
We can make that a condition.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, if I could just explore a little bit further the public easement concept for the sidewalk, would that have to be something that would be recorded? And if so, or typically recorded, and if so, is that something that the applicants are willing to see done so that it is an assurance of a public easement?
Yes. The way the site was designed was with that intention that that sidewalk would be used by the public. People at all times of the day and night could use it, with all of its consequences to a private property owner, but knowing that that is part of our project.
And just one point of order, if you were to stipulate that that would be a public easement, we would ask you to also stipulate that their civil engineer comes up with the survey showing exactly where that public access of record is. Legal description, excuse me, of the public easement.
Good idea.
If you would like, I can read the draft language that I had
would
thought
wait till
about.
we get to
Okay,
that
but
point. Thank you.
I guess I'm not sure that, for myself, I don't see a need to make it a public easement and go through the survey process. That just seems like extra expense for the applicant, for the town staff, for everybody, really. What I wanted to do was to just add a condition on the approval of the application to specify that, as you said, you already intended, I know you already intended this, that this sidewalk be accessible 24/7 to the public, just to record, not so much for you, but for a future applicant who might use this property for another thing, just to have it in the record that this was the thinking of the Planning Commission, that because we have let go of that 4-foot sidewalk over on the other side, that we are depending on there being some way to come through there. And that was really my thinking. It wasn't so much for what you're doing, because you're already doing it, but it's for future applicants. So I'm not sure I see the need for a formal recording of with the title company to have a public easement. But I'm open to the idea.
Through the chair, I have a question for staff. Are we not recording a revocable easement for the encroachments we are granting through our right-of-ways? And so I think it appropriate to record both the revocable easements that we are granting and this pass-through, because hopefully this business would be in town forever, but if not, then the record would not be clear, and we would not have the muscle to require that should this owner change their mind or another owner come along and redesign the site. So I highly recommend the revocable easement and the irrevocable easement in that case.
It does help to nail it down. It's not too onerous of exercise, but we think it should be on the applicant's side.
Every legal bone in my body says you better record.
If you're getting close to end of questions for the applicant, you might want to open up to the public.
I have just a few questions. Okay, I noticed, I'm not quite sure where, we're granting 3 signs. Is that correct? I just want to clarify exactly.
2 signs, yeah.
3 signs?
Yeah, we're down to 2 signs. Originally, there were more, but the monument sign and then the sign over the door.
Okay, I just noticed on this recent site plan, it looks like the monument sign might be over the property line. Is that allowed?
It hits the sidewalk, and it was part of the disclosure of what is in the public right-of-way.
Yeah, it does go over the property line. So if we ever need our public right-of-way for something, they'll have to move the sign.
So they would have to get an encroachment permit or
It's
some
part,
process?
yeah, it's part of their encroachment permit. That little
Okay.
section that
All right,
extends.
I just wanted to point that out.
And revocable.
Revocable, yes.
Okay, my other question is regarding the wall that's along Sir Francis Drake. I don't know, I kind of have issues that it might be too big, too bulky. I would think you want to keep the front of the property open and more inviting to passersby, so I'd like to maybe hear what you have to say about that.
I'd love to describe it. I think it goes back to, if you see the light green area on the site plan, that is where that is the garden that the outdoor area that is shared with the indoor area. Large roll-up doors, indoor-outdoor eating. Part of that is Sir Francis Drake is a busy street. It's not only vibration, but it's visual noise when you're in that area. So at the left-hand corner, when you're on the sidewalk, walking along the fence, it's at 3'6". It gets to 7 feet at the corner, and that's mainly so when you're in the garden, you sit down. It's a feeling of an oasis. From our standpoint, and looking at the modeling and walking the site, you don't necessarily see the site from straight across the street, or if you do, you see the building and the sign. When you're walking along the sidewalk, at the upper left-hand corner, the northwest corner, you'll actually get a glimpse down into the site, and it's a little bit of a layering in terms of trying to mediate the noise of Sir Francis Drake, but also not keep it too high. So the inside, I think, 6 feet on the inside. So about here, and then on the outside, at the low end, it's waist height, and it goes up to 6 feet.
Staff, do we have a limit as to how high? Is that considered like a fence, or what is that considered? Because I don't know, 7 feet seems like
6
we might
feet,
be.
sorry.
6 feet, 6 feet. And in
Okay.
commercial zones, the fences can go up to 6 feet. They don't have setbacks like the residential zones, so structures can go up to there's no requirements that they be kept to the 4 feet.
Well, but what I'm saying is, so if they're proposing 7 at the
No,
highest,
it's
is that
6
open?
feet.
Oh,
I
it's
misspoke,
six.
yeah.
It is 6.
And
6
then- and
feet,
then it-
sorry, I
And then
misspoke.
it drops in height, you know.
Okay.
Right, it's not 6, it's just 6 kind of at the one part
At the
near
end,
the,
at
near
the end near the
bank,
monument sign a little bit,
and then
yeah.
it gradually drops.
Okay, all right.
And
that's-
actually, you know, there are going to be people out at night, and I think that, you know, for the lights and everything, it just seems like they kind of need it at that one corner.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the whole constraints thing, we're mediating between Sir Francis Drake and trying to create kind of a buffer, but not put a building or a big, you know, a 10-foot wall there, but also keep it open. So there is no fence from the north where you enter the sidewalk on the north down to the entrance of the building. There's no high fence. So you'll be able to look right into the garden from the town and from when you come from the east on Sir Francis Drake.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying, because that was a concern, and I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be more than 6 feet at its highest point. So,
I'm sorry, could you further clarify? Are you saying that in the green rectangle upon which the monument sign sits, there is no fence in that entire area?
There's no fence in that area.
Okay. Thank you, that helps.
And partly the reason it's north is to make sure that you are able to see it in time to make a turn without, we looked at, you know, we drove in the model in a fake car and walked the site, and we wanted to make sure that the parking lot and the site was visible.
any more questions of the applicant? Okay. Anyone from the public like to make any comments?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann Manis for Azalea. Thanks for having me. I'm here to support the station. It's a wonderful design, clean, green, forward-thinking, and sophisticated. And I just find it amazing that for so long in this town, we've had this old, decaying gas station that's been an eyesore for the people that come into this town. And there's actually an opportunity to turn this into something that is really viable and something that Fairfax residents will want to come to. So it's such a great opportunity. And I also think it's amazing that you all are sitting in a place that can make these decisions and help these opportunities happen. So the design that was submitted, it's really addresses some critical climate change issues in our town, which is, of course, a big value here. And in spite of that, you know, there's biking, there's very pedestrian friendly, there's green elements to the design. And in spite of that, and at the town's request, there's been some adjustments to the plan, and now there's a parking lot that is kind of bringing back car reliance, and so now we do have, you know, Chevy SUVs being able to enter, which isn't very Fairfax, but they made the adjustments, and I think they were accommodating what the town was asking. So, you know, I just want to say any delays or further compromises to this plan really is putting these entrepreneurs in jeopardy. And I just want to kind of offer again, it's in your hands. So I just would hope that you make the right decision and move this along and not have any more delays. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else from the public like to make any comments? Okay, so we're going to close the public hearing at this point, and I guess this would be an opportunity, Bruce, for you to bring up your condition you'd like to add.
Yeah, so I could read this condition. It may not be the same as I've written, and we'll see whether we all agree with it, but the proposal that I had written out would be on page 6 of the resolution, There's, at the top of the page, there's a paragraph that's labeled number 21. It's the last of 21 paragraphs. So this would be to add a paragraph labeled 22 after that. And that paragraph would read, in consideration of the compromise to the width of the walkway along the east side of the parking area, which was allowed to offer the applicant more space for the business and parking, the walkway through the property will remain open to the public for pedestrian and disabled access at all times. That was
Per the plans.
per the plans. Okay, we could add that. And had this, per the plans. Per the drawing? You mean per drawing A 1.00 is what it is. And then
we can live with that. Linda has heartburn over that, so just
over which?
Over not having survey.
It's standard.
Well, no, I'm not ruling out that we do. No, it
yeah.
sounded like the
I think it needs
commissioners
to be
felt that we
recorded.
should do this could be in addition to, or this could be skipped, but this was just the condition that I wrote before coming to this meeting and hearing the strong arguments, which I agree with, in favor of going ahead and formalizing it as an easement. So it could be done as an easement as well, but this could be a condition that easement be left open, whatever it takes. Anyway, the point was just to address the question of that sidewalk on the east side by saying, let's really formalize the fact that we need the sidewalk through it, even though that is the plan now, but just formalize that to make sure. Okay.
Through the chair, the only point I would clarify in that condition is that, and also in a way to respond to the last speaker's comment, the requirement to have an adequate turnaround radius in the parking lot was not just at the willy-nilly of the community, but there was a health and safety issue there that the applicant was required to address. So I don't want to make it sound like we were holding up the process for a reason that wasn't a legitimate health concern.
And I might echo that while it may seem that Fairfax is not about cars and is more about pedestrian bikes, we still have on the record of the code the parking requirement and the standards that are set that are prescribed by the town code, and until that town code is changed, that is the code of the town, it's the will of the town. It's not an arbitrary request on your part. In fact, you're granting a variance to the exception of the code.
So I have recommended revision to the resolution to address recording of a easement for the public access on the sidewalk, and it would go in on page 3, which is on page 2 begins a list of things the applicant or his assigns shall do prior to the issuance of a building permit. And item G is sign, notarize, and record the revocable encroachment permit at the Marin County Recorder's Office. I think we could also add to that paragraph language about signing, notarizing, and recording an irrevocable easement for public right-of-way for the sidewalk to be developed, and you're going to have to use a sidewalk to be the legal description of which to be prepared by the applicant's engineer
And recorded along with the easement.
and recorded along with the, but would our engineer need to look at it before it was recorded?
Yeah.
Upon
That'd
approval
be standard
by
up.
our engineer,
Yeah.
whatever your standard language along those lines might be.
Great.
Anyone have anything else?
Couple of tiny things. let's get to the tiny things now. On page 6, paragraph 21, I believe, ends in a ... which I didn't understand why. That's really minor. The amplified instrument instead of amplified keyboard, just to remind us while we're doing the changes. That
Where
makes
was that,
sense.
Bruce?
Paragraph 19, page 3, or page 5.
Right at the bottom of the page, if I remember right. On page 2, down at the bottom, paragraph 1, right under the whereas, where it says this approval is limited, blah, 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 it lists all of the drawings, right? And so I think that paragraph should end in place of the period at the end of that. Take out where A1.00, remove that from the list of drawings, and instead put at the bottom, at the end of that paragraph, and page A1.00 revised 7/9/15. That's the revision date on what the thing's shown up there, because that's where the whole widening of the parking area was. So that's it as far as changes, and just to make a general comment, I do really appreciate the work that's gone into this. I further appreciate what the town did. This has got a long history. This little blighted spot has quite a history, and I thought it was a proud moment for the town when we pulled the general plan out and we actually used it to show, to be able to have documented why everybody in the town reacted so strongly to having a Chevron station and a convenience store there. It was really nice at that point to have a general plan, because we could say, see, we actually took the trouble to write down what our preferences were as a town, and that turned out to be very helpful. So I'm really happy that this series of events has led to what we actually envisioned when there was a lot of discussion about that Chevron station, which is to have something nice here. So for that reason, I'm supportive of this, and I'm happy that it's happening. That's all the changes for my.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have another just request of staff that for two things. One is when the town engineer is looking, or the traffic engineer is looking at signage on don't turn left when you leave and don't turn left, Officer Francis Drake, could you also please ask him to look at whether some signs on that little square of sidewalk that say don't cross here might be appropriate? Because I just think human nature is people will get there and think they can cross. And then the second thing is to please, when we are working on a plan for landscaping that easement area, include the phytoremediation considerations that I raised last month. That's my only comments.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, someone like to make a motion?
I would move that we adopt resolution, hang on, 1520 with the changes that we have discussed.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I guess.
Let the record show, I think it was 4-0. There is an appeal period.
Yes. So your project's been approved by the Planning Commission. There is a 10-day appeal period of $500, which would be appealed to the Town Council. But thank you. asked my question at the beginning.
About the landscaping. Yeah,
And I
because
guess I
it didn't even occur to me, I was,
It's like, is that really right?
it didn't even occur to me that they wouldn't be doing the landscaping. That's why when you asked that, it was like, oh, wait a minute.
Item is number 7, solar energy permitting ordinance.
Yes. And Madam Chair, members of the commission, and people at home watching tonight or on the tape, I'm going to paraphrase the staff report, which is online. This is what is before you tonight, consideration of an ordinance to streamline review and approve small residential rooftop solar energy systems as required by a new law, AB 2188, that was signed by Governor Brown on September 21st of last year. That's less than 10 months ago. This was signed into law, and we are required to have it adopted by the end of September, 1 year. So we're on a fast track. Again, this is a state mandated ordinance, and the assistant town attorney, Katie Wazinski, who handles things for the Planning Commission, was fighting pneumonia last week. That's why I came to you a little late. She did a yeoman's effort at getting this out, and she's probably watching tonight. So Katie, thank you so much for your stellar work. So this ordinance was drafted by our legal counsel. And after your stop tonight and hopefully adopting the resolution to recommend that the council adopt this streamlined solar ordinance for residential rooftop within the specifications called out in the ordinance, it will go to the town council on August 5th for the first reading, and then as prescribed by law, the second reading at a normally scheduled council meeting in September, and then it will go into effect 30 days after the formal adoption at the normal September town council meeting. The ordinance was a bit of a challenge, as I understand it, for legal counsel to draft, because the stipulation in the state law is kind of convoluted to how we often do business. So you may have noticed some little quirks in the ordinance language itself, for example, that the building official is going to grant the use permit. That's very unusual language. That's because the appellate board, as prescribed by this law, is the Planning Commission itself. So there's these little wrinkles in there that I can try to explain further if you have any stumbling points on it. But Again, this was put together by legal counsel. Next stop is the town council on August 5th, just a couple weeks away. It'll get publicly noticed 10 days before the meeting. Anybody from the audience that didn't make it here tonight or wasn't aware of this, you're welcome to come to the town council meeting. And just to back up to the big picture, even though the state has been big on trying to promote photovoltaics statewide, there has been pockets of resistance within the state. So for small rooftop solar facilities, the intent of this mandatory ordinance is to streamline it so that when people come in and they fit within the checklist that is attached and within the qualifications in the third attachment to the ordinance, that it is an over-the-counter building permit. So when you read in this ordinance about use permits and going before the planning commissions, that's when something doesn't qualify as the small system. That convoluted language in section D under use permit, that's if it doesn't fit in 17-138-230 below. If it fits, then they get within 1 day an over-the-counter building permit. So this preamble in the use permit is just when it doesn't fit and the building official deems it to have something that's necessary to go before a public hearing. And that's the other wrinkle in this, is that the council had to weave in here the public's right to challenge something if it isn't within the purview of this streamlining mandate. I hope that made sense, but that's where we are.
Okay, anyone have questions of staff?
I noted, well, I have a quick question. This printed thing that you put here on our desk for us is exactly the same as the electronic because I read that. Okay. This is a comment and just for the public who might be listening, that this excludes from the streamlined process a solar system that includes battery storage. And I think that is the correct thing to do. So I support this as written, for the reason that battery storage in a grid-tied solar system is a new thing. It's just starting to come on. Tesla's got some batteries out. Marine Clean Energy is doing a very small pilot program. It's very exciting developments with storage on the grid, and I think eventually there will be more storage that people use along with solar for a number of reasons. And therefore, I would think that maybe a few years later, when we all get more experience with that, we might come back and amend this ordinance to add some what at that time starts to become a more standard system to the streamlined process. For now, however, that would be inappropriate because the industry does not have the experience. So anyway, in short, I support this as it's written. I've looked over it pretty carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. And by the way, we concur that the Tesla battery that just came out is going to be a game changer on the grid.
Well, there are other things like hooking an electric car in so that can be used as a battery. There's really an amazing number of things that are starting to happen and will happen a lot more pretty rapidly.
And this is just one step in that whole direction of the evolution we're in.
And I guess I'd also comment that to concur that with the intent that the state and the governor felt of having to have this law, there really are places that are not like Fairfax where for whatever reason, it is a real pain in the neck to get a solar system set up. And so there was a reason why this was done on the state level, to try to open up that. So good work.
A question for staff. I'm extremely supportive of this item, and obviously it's a legal mandate. But I'm wondering, I'm looking at the use permit, solar energy system 17-138-220 refers to an adverse impact that the building official makes written findings that the only way not issue a permit if it falls within these standards is that if there's an adverse impact, I can't think of what an adverse impact would be to solar panels. Can someone throw something out there that might?
It's actually in your definitions.
The end of C, there's some discussion about, he has to make his finding about specific adverse impact upon public health or safety. I don't think it's an adverse impact to the panels. I think it's an adverse impact to public health or safety.
Like if they're installed in a manner that they might fall on
Or
somebody?
cause a fire.
Okay.
I
just
actually
wondering
had a
if there was-
question about the same issue, so if I might
right
just
ahead.
jump off from where you were. My question is about adverse impacts to things other than public health or safety, such as wildlife. Is this language prescribed by the state? It really limits it to public health or safety. It takes out any endangered species concerns. And I don't ask this in connection with a small residential solar system. What I raise it in connection with is the more general solar systems that are discussed and defined under 17-138-220. Right? Because we're dealing in this proposed ordinance with two different sets of systems, correct? The residential small residential rooftop solar energy system and solar energy systems as defined in paragraphs 1 and 2 of subdivision A. And that regulation of solar energy systems as opposed to small residential rooftop solar energy systems is not prescribed by the state, right? The state's prescription is solely with respect to the small residential rooftop solar energy systems. So because I'm not familiar enough with the definition, and I really didn't have the time to go look it up, do you guys have an understanding of whether the solar energy system has a limit? Is it similarly limited in scope or size or in some other manner? Or is it any solar energy system that we're talking about here? And I can probably Google the citation and look it up right now if we had to, but.
Yeah, I can't off the top of my head answer that, but just to sort of couch your question, what we would recommend is that if these this is a very good question. We would take this forward. We would visit it with legal counsel between now and August 5th when it goes to council, and we would address it in the interim and be ready to speak to it at council, and if necessary.
Okay, so my recommendation really, if I had my druthers, is to never limit the adverse impacts that the engineer might determine are a trigger for letting. So just tie his hands to only have to find an adverse impact to public health or safety, but any adverse impact, because I don't know, I don't know why you would limit it, because I think we're also concerned about environmental. There are, these huge solar arrays that vaporize birds, and we don't want that. But,
well, I believe, my understanding, and I think you're correct, I see where you're going with this, and I agree 17-138-220 is about the ones that don't qualify in the streamlined process. So this is a larger scope. My understanding, though, and maybe I'm incorrect, but Jim, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. What this whole ordinance is talking about is not really like if someone were to want to build, like if Marine Clean Energy were to want to build something that was acres in size. That's really not what we're talking about here, even under 17-138-220. Something like that would have to go under CEQA review. So this is my understanding anyway. My assumption is that anything talked about in this ordinance, including that phrase that you're speaking of, is really referring to basically rooftop solar systems that we would go through the utility and get, we would basically be a net energy metering customer if we did that, as opposed to big solar systems where we would be a wholesale provider of electricity if we did that. That would go through, automatically that would go under a full CEQA review to do something like that, and that would of course take into account all the other considerations. But I'm not objecting to adding something to that if it doesn't mess up what the state requires us to say.
Okay, I've got the definition here from the Civil Code, 801.5A. My gosh, I wish I had better eyesight. The right of receiving sunlight as specified in subdivision 18 of section 801 shall be referred to as a solar easement. Solar easement means the right of receiving sunlight across real property of another for any solar energy system. As used in this section, solar energy system means either 1, any solar collector or other solar energy device whose primary purpose is to provide for the collection, storage, and distribution of solar energy for space heating, space cooling, electric generation, or water heating. And 2, any structural design feature of a building whose primary purpose is to provide for the collection, storage, and distribution of solar energy for electricity generation, space heating, or cooling, or for water heating. I think the first of those two is so broad, it's not even limited to buildings, that I would just feel a lot more comfortable making a recommendation to the council to not tie the town to having to make a finding of an adverse impact upon public health or safety with respect to solar energy systems in general. I would recommend revising paragraph C and anywhere else in 138-220 to delete upon the public health or safety, actually. So you just have a specific adverse impact, and that leaves the town a lot more discretion to make a finding of adverse impact.
For other than the small residential rooftop systems?
Right, 220 is really just for the solar energy systems as defined in the civil code I just read. 230 is for small residential rooftop solar systems, and I guess that's what you're saying, Jim, that the adverse impact upon public health or safety is specifically prescribed by state law as being the only basis. I hate this when they take that out of our hands. Seems like endangered species don't matter, it's just public health and safety. Anyway, whatever. But if we have no say one way or the other as to what that standard is for the small residential rooftop, I guess I live with it.
I think we got it, and we'll take it forward.
You know, I appreciate the commissioner's comments, because that was it was these kind of large, I don't know what I refer to it as like a ground system, like the one that was located over at White Hill School. I just wanted to make sure that the town had the discretion that they would refer items that they thought maybe probably need a more thorough public process review, and that we had the means in order, and that was in the language in order.
Your points are well taken. We'll take it forward.
I have another question.
The ground system, as I understand it, would not be covered under section 230. It would have to go, yeah.
Okay,
I think
good.
we're good.
My other question is under 17-138-230B, and specifically B2. It says the town shall, prior to September 30th, 2015, adopt an administrative non-discretionary expedited review process for small residential rooftop solar energy systems. That seems a little bizarre. This resolution, if the council adopts it, you'll probably have to go through first and second readings. I would suspect you're lucky if you get it adopted by the September meeting, which you got to do. But what's the deal with also having the ordinance say that the town has to adopt this review process by the end of September. Why don't we have the review process here in the resolution?
Isn't this it?
Well, I think it kind of is, right?
This is the
Yeah. The check boxes, these pages at the end, it seems to me are probably a pretty good start on the process, right? This is what staff would use, is these, fill out these forms, right? So I think the steps from the council adopting it to the staff having the process is probably pretty well mostly thought out. Is that correct? I mean, I think I understand what you're saying, Mimi, that this is, you're wondering how that can happen in such a short time, or whether, or maybe you're just asking what there is actually to be done, but.
I'm asking why it's not part of the resolution as opposed to this, oh, we will do this thing because we've got all this stuff here, so it just.
If I understand, you're saying it's
understand.
redundant because it will be done by the time the ordinance is passed?
No, I don't understand the distinction between adopting a resolution that sets all this stuff in the ordinance and the ordinance saying you're going to adopt a review process. Isn't the review process included in the ordinance? I mean, the checklists are not part of the ordinance, right? Is that what we're saying?
No, it's an attachment to the ordinance.
So why does this say you're going to adopt some separate process as opposed to just saying, here's the process?
I see your point.
I guess it's just prescribing what's coming later in the ordinance.
It should be revised then to make it clearer because it's very confusing as to what the import of you shall do this by this date in an ordinance is
It's already
supposed to
adopted.
mean.
We'll take your comment forward.
But through the chair, the title of the resolution does say to provide a permitting process for solar energy systems.
Right. And
That gets incorporated into the chapter of the code.
This language is in the ordinance, not the resolution. So we'll take your comment forward and ask. It seems a little bit redundant to me in the sense that it's moot because once this goes into effect by that date, why reference something that's already occurred? But we'll pass it on.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to make a motion or anything?
That's the resolution, yes.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion?
I move to pass resolution number 1524, recommending the town council adopt Article 2 to Chapter 17.138 of the town municipal code to provide a permitting process for solar energy systems with the changes that we've discussed and directed staff to evaluate.
Anyone want to second the motion?
Sure, I second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 So we are at the minutes, but do we have a quorum in order to approve the minutes?
No, we'll have to continue them.
Okay, so we will continue the approval of the minutes to the next meeting in August.
Can I give some comments on the minutes so that maybe we've got a different set of minutes? And I think it was just the ingress-egress issue on the signage discussion on page 6. Commissioner Newton and Ms. Neal discussed the resolution in relation to there being no residences immediately adjacent to the property. Ms. Neal noted the second units built above adjacent businesses are part of the commercial zone, which does not change any analysis for the use permit. They discussed signage for the site, and Ms. Neal explained why the traffic engineer does not favor a left turn into the site. Although I think the egress issue is is a good one too, but that's not what we were talking about.
Okay,
Have a second chance to edit these next time.
anyone have any other additional comments? All right, then. I guess we have no discussion items scheduled, but we have a planning director's report.
And I'll be real brief so we can actually make this a really short meeting tonight. We're targeting the end of August for the third general plan / housing element forum on converting the highway commercial district to central commercial in the last week of August. It's not a done deal yet, but we're targeting that. And we're targeting the last week of September. Again, nothing firm yet, but targeting the last week of September for the traffic forum that grew out of the first two general plan forums last summer, when people were asking, how come we have all this increased traffic when we're not really growing that fast? Where the heck is it coming from? And if you recall, there was some data gathered when school started last fall that our traffic engineer, Mr. Parisi, has, and we just cut him loose to start doing the crunching on that data, and then getting his other analysis together for the Ross Valley in preparation for what will be a very interesting and I believe informative traffic forum. And we may touch just tangentially on parking also at that forum, but we'll see how that shakes out. So those are the two target dates, or target months. We've sort of gotten waylaid. And then the town center plan workshop process, which has continually slid since last summer, we're looking to the spring and early summer to have what will be 2, possibly 3 public workshops on the development of a town center plan as called for in the town center element. And that's when we will be thoroughly vetting and discussing the disposition of Bank Street, the circulation system in town, everything from bicycle parking, loading areas, planter strips on center that may be not alive. All these things we will get into the woods on, and I can't wait for that process. It's been delayed so long because there are so many great opportunities out there, so I'm looking forward to that exercise also. And with that, I think that's all I have of real importance to report tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Does anyone have any comments? Okay, Bruce?
I do. Yeah, on Tuesday of this week, the Climate Action Committee met, and we had a wonderful presentation given to us by Rachel Guinness of Lily Pad Homes that was on the subject of junior second units. And I just wanted to say that I would highly recommend that we invite Ms. Guinness to make a similar presentation to the Planning Commission or possibly to the Council. That I heard about junior second units through a presentation to the Affordable Housing Committee, and I've talked with Jim about it, and I felt like I kind of got the concept, but I learned a lot on Tuesday. Really just the logic of it and how it fits into demographics, how it fits. I really cannot enough recommend and this was a short 10-15 minute or so presentation with discussion that Rachel Guinness gave us. So I just highly recommend that we bring that to a forum where the public can learn from it. I learned a lot from it.
Hey, can I just piggyback what you just said? Rachel, I've been in touch with, and we're going to be getting together in August. And she's also been very instrumental in Novato's success in getting both water and sewer to relax any hookup fees, since it's already a built environment and presumably would have the capacity under the existing permits. And we're going to be liaison. She's already reaching out to our utility providers here in the Ross Valley that would be applicable to junior second units here. And we, in discussing this, thought that, you know, it's going to be kind of onerous for each jurisdiction to go through this. This is a wonderful, one of the wonderful pieces of the toolkit to address the dire need for affordable housing communities in the already built environment, truly affordable. As her case study 15 years ago, how she saved her own house is testimony to. So I was fortunate to get her in touch with the Deputy Director of the Strategic Growth Council at the state this week. It's a little known agency since 2006. It's supposed to be spearheading all the best practices in how we're going to manage to provide folks with homes and not increase our, minimize to the extent possible the increase in greenhouse footprint in doing so. And so I'm really excited that the Deputy Director, Allison Joe, seems like they're going to have a changing of executive directors over the next several months at the Strategic Growth Council, which is made up of all the bigwigs of different agencies at the state level. But we began this week to lobby the Strategic Growth Council of possibly supporting legislation to preempt local utilities statewide from imposing undue fee requirements on what is already the built environment. And it's wonderful stuff.
Okay. Anyone have any other comments they'd like to?
I just had one comment. I pulled this page from the Summerwood Home Studio Kits from one of the items today, adding an accessory structure to the property, and these are adorable. I'm going to look these up on the net. I think it's something that is finally, it's like the tiny house movement that I'm very interested in. And so we might look at these types of products now that are coming onto the market that would be great for second units or expanding a home so that a family that grows up and, you know, that little baby is now 6 feet tall with size 12 shoes could have a separate room or a study or something.
And a drum set.
Exactly.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Well, someone would like to have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
A second.
Okay, adjourned.
Hey, thank you all for a great meeting. Thank you so much.